begin by reading John 11, 1 to 6. You can follow along if you wish. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and her sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with an ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So his sisters sent to him, saying, Lord, he whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, This illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. The story of Lazarus begins by telling us that he was ill. You know, there are a lot of things in the Bible that often we talk about and we need to explain, right? Sometimes issues of culture or history just seem so foreign to us, but this is not one of those things. We all know illness, even ever since we were born. Illness is something that's always very real to us. I remember being in grade school, and it's always interesting to see when kids miss class due to illness. What did this kid get this time? One kid would get strep throat, another kid had mono, and another one got the flu, and of course there are always colds. Modern medicine cannot stop it. No matter how much you try to prevent it, you will eventually get sick. Now we can reduce the chance of getting sick by staying clean and healthy, right? Washing hands, taking showers, eating healthy, and getting exercise. But there's not a single person here who can be certain that they will never get sick from this day forward. It doesn't matter what you think, and it doesn't matter how you approach life. Illness is still a common thing today. But of course the situation was much worse back in the times of the Bible. Back in ancient times, most people were too poor to afford treatment. And even if they did get to see a doctor, which some of them did, of course they didn't understand germs and medicine in the same way that we do. So you get a lot of stories in the books of the Gospels, in the books of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, about miracles of healing. People were sick, sometimes to the point of death. Jesus was their hope. The crowds would rush to Jesus for healing because they heard he was a healer. And Jesus was not your typical healer. Even today, if you go to a doctor, you're not always going to get the help you need. Just look at medicine in general as an example. The way that the human body reacts to medicine is not completely predictable. Sometimes you watch those TV commercials and they have all these various drugs, always new drugs coming out, and they like to advertise that these are like wondrous drugs that can solve new problems. And you see these pictures of smiling, happy, healthy people, some pleasant music in the background. But what does the commercial actually say? You have to talk to a doctor to see if it's right for you. Not everyone gets the good results they want from it. And some may even experience terrible side effects. These are not perfect cures. But that wasn't the case with Jesus. Jesus had a 100% success rate in healing. No one else in history could compare. And Mary and Martha knew this. They knew that Jesus could heal their brother. Lazarus was sick. Jesus could heal him. So they told Jesus, the one you love is ill. This wasn't a lie. If you look at verse 5, it confirms that Jesus did indeed love Lazarus and his sisters. But what does Jesus do when he hears about Lazarus? It says that he loved him. And so he waited. Let's take a moment to think about the miraculous healings of Jesus. There are many of them, right? And so Jesus healed by touch. Jesus sometimes just healed by a spoken command. He just told them to be healed. And Jesus even healed the servant of a centurion long distance by just saying, "Let it be done." Now he has done all these things for people he barely met. But for Lazarus, the one he loved, Jesus did not heal. When we face painful moments in life, it can be hard for us to understand why these things are happening to us. We want to be happy, but life is far from perfect. Things are bound to come crashing down somehow, some way. Unemployment, mental struggles, bad relationships, dangerous accidents, and even terminal illness. And when things come crashing down, and you come face to face with God, our natural response is to ask, why? Why did this have to happen? If God loves me, why is he doing this to me? Sometimes there are lessons to be learned. God may be trying to teach us something through that hardship. But other times, God's purposes are not so clear. Jesus loved Lazarus. Yet when he heard about his illness, Jesus did not run to heal him. And yet, we know he loved him. So the presence of pain is not the absence of love. Here we see this. No matter how bad things may seem sometimes, if we are loved by God, then that isn't changed by anything. We are loved by God. Though Jesus loved him, though he knew what would happen to him, Jesus stayed where he was for 2 more days. By the time Jesus did return to them, Lazarus was already dead. He had been dead and buried for 4 days. Martha, when hearing that Jesus arrives, comes out first to meet him. Though we can't hear her voice, her words reveal her disappointment. "If you had been here, my brother would not have died." Verses 23 to 25 says, Jesus said to her, "Your brother will rise again." Martha said to him, "I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day." Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." This is our faith, our hope, and our comfort. I'm here to tell you today that in Jesus Christ, we do not need to fear death, nor do we need to let it darken our lives. Jesus is the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in him will live and never die. Though he die, yet shall he live. When my father was in the hospital, it pained me to see him. I knew that it was him. I could see some semblance of his former self, but he was not the same person I had seen before. He looked little more than skin and bones. I could not bear to see him in that condition. He was not in pain. He was not sad. But of course, things were never pleasant for him. And he slept a lot, slept peacefully until his final breath. Then it became bearable to look upon his body, because he was no more. I felt nothing when I looked upon his lifeless face. The nurse came in and said that we had some extra time to spend with him before they wrapped him up and took him down to be stored. I saw no reason for that extra time, because to me that was no longer him. He was not there. He was already long gone. That was only the likeness of my father. But my father was no longer on that bed. He believes in Jesus, therefore he lives. In my heart, I want to say that this is a cause for celebration. Why mourn? Why not rejoice? He has moved on to a better place. If we look at things logically, or theologically, we should be happy for him. But we cannot always escape our emotions. Martha was the voice of reason. She spoke with Jesus plainly about the situation. But Mary was the voice of emotion. Verses 32 to 35. Now when Mary came to Jesus and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. Mary believed in the same things that Martha believed in. She had the same faith and conviction. She knew that Lazarus would one day rise again, that they would all one day be together again in a better place. That's what we look forward to. But Mary still wept. Losing someone you love still hurts. Separation still hurts. Faith and reason cannot stop the tears. She fell before Jesus and cried. What's even stranger, though, is that Jesus also wept. When we understand who Jesus is, what he does, and what he even does here, for those of you who know the story, his reaction is puzzling. Jesus knew from the beginning that Lazarus would get sick. Jesus let him die. Jesus came with the purpose of raising him from the dead, knowing that he could do it, and he would do it. And yet Jesus still wept. We weep when things don't go the way we want. Jesus knew ahead of time that everything was going perfectly according to God's plan, and he still wept. He wept because they wept. He cared because they cared. In this story we see three wondrous truths coming together for our comfort in times of distress and in times of death. First, God was fully in control over their painful situation. Second, God loved them in spite of the troubles that they had to face. And third, God cared so much for them that he was moved to tears. The story of Lazarus has a happy ending. We can't say the same for every struggle we face. But we can't let that be a discouragement. In the end, God is greater than our struggles. God loves us and cares for our sorrows. And God gives us that everlasting hope of the resurrection on the last day. The pain is for a moment, but God's goodness is for eternity.